Hello again, people! If you've been paying attention, you have just realized that I have been doing a lot of different Daggerfall stuff lately with reading books. And, well, we just finished one part of a stream, and I decided to stop right there because we're going to do a 12-parter King Edward series. As terrible as that sounds. Why? Because it's here, it exists, and we want to get it all out of our inventory. Getting 11 parts of King Edward's out of here will be beautiful. So, yeah. Getting out of the way, we'll only have real Barinza sitting around, so it'll make it much easier to figure out what we have. Which definitely is useful. So, alright, with all that in mind, let's actually get to this King Edward series, so read all 12 parts. Yeah. How long are these chapters anyway? Oh, I am glad that there's a lot of pages for each chapter. Oh boy. Okay, King Edward Part 1. Chapter 1. Departure from Daggerfall. So we have a lengthy novel to read over here. Okay, this should be fun. Long, long ago, when the world was in its springtime, before the Red Guards came, and the glorious Septim Empire was formed, but after the goblins had driven the dwarves out of Hammerfell, a son, Edward, was born to King Kosir I of Daggerfall and his queen, Alira of Wayras. The young boy looked drowsing in the palace orchard, high on a breezy hill, overlooking the deep blue bay of Daggerfall. The constant autumn fog of Daggerfall had blown away for the nonce, and the sky was a deep, endless blue. Moments like this were rare for the young Prince Edward. This afternoon was the result of days of scheming, for he craved solitude as the other nobles he knew craved companionship. Now his tutor believed him engaged in extra arms practice. The master of arms believed him to be chasing deer with the huntsmaster, who thought he was studying Elvish. His father had no idea where he was and didn't care, being occupied with his young wife and their sons, and other pleasures in noble life. At the plop of an arrow barely missing his head, he opened his pale gray eyes. There was a sweet rotten smell in his nostrils. He sighed and stared up at the blue. Why should things fall down instead of up? If you stared at the sky long enough, you could feel as if you were falling into it. His eyes glazed, and the pupils drew huge, as the dark-ringed irises dilated. He was weightless, drifting. Another apple fell, grazing his ear, and he thudded to earth, crying out as first his rump struck, and then his head. A silvery laugh sounded. Edward sat up abruptly and stared around, jaw hanging slack. Two mounted men stood 10 feet away, still as if they were carved from stone, regarding him intently. Princes are not easily intimidated, not even the gentle-souled kind. But Edward had never seen or imagined anything like this pair. One had golden skin and eyes, was clad in white cloth trimmed with gold, and Rhoda. Edward blinked. It was still there. A unicorn! Beside the unicorn was a golden dragon, wings neatly folded, and on his back was a man clad in dark chainmail, a long sword at his side. He was bareheaded, his eyes glowed red in his dark face, and his pointed ears. You're elves! What? He's a clever child! The dark elf's voice was sardonic. He spoke perfect Bretic, Edward noticed, his mind still working, although something seemed to have gone wrong with the rest of him. So it would seem. He did that mostly of himself. Remarkable for an untrained child. I merely helped him to concentrate. The High Elf also spoke Bretic, but hesitantly and with a slight singing accent. Edward's tutor said that elves were incapable of human speech. Edward's gaze shifted rapidly over the 4 beings in front of him, unable to find a comfortable resting place. He hoped briefly, fervently, that he was dreaming. His mind seethed with questions and demands. Then quite suddenly his tongue came unstuck. "I wasn't concentrating at all! My masters say I'm incapable!" Edward clamped his jaw down hard, suddenly realizing that it might be unwise to argue with beings such as these. But the golden elf smiled broadly, showing perfect white teeth. Exactly. He radiated such warm approval that Edward felt his skin tingle pleasantly. It was a feeling that he'd only known with his long-gone mother. But the other elf's face was expressionless. The red eyes bored into Edward as if they'd pierce his soul. "Merenglin! You're Merenglin, the Witch King!" He jumped to his feet and faced the dark elf. "You stole my mother! My father will kill you!" I did? Really? Shall we call him and find out?" The dark elf straightened, and his eyes glowed deeper. A tiny puff of steam escaped the dragon's nostrils. A glowing aura appeared around his companion. Edward knew he wasn't going to call the guard. Why should they be slaughtered? Those two looked capable of anything. Quite suddenly, he was no longer afraid. If they were here to hurt him, they'd have done it by now. But a feeling of impotent rage remained. They'd taken his mother, and now... "Why are you here?" he demanded. "Edward, will you come with us?" the high elf spoke. Hearing him was like hearing a harp, cool as a breeze, warm as a fireside. The boy stood very still. He wanted very much to say yes to his own amazement. He wanted to ask if he would see his mother, but instead, "My father," he croaked. "We'll miss you, no doubt." The irony was back in Merlin's voice, a voice that make Edward think of icicles sparkling and dripping in the winter sun. But there was a sort of hunger in his golden eyes, a longing. His father wouldn't miss him, and he knew it. Shame ran through the boy, but he looked up at the broad-shouldered elf defiantly. "Are you my father?" Edward had meant the question to match the elf's sarcasm, but his hand crept to his ear as if by itself. He wasn't anything like his short-tempered, hearty, red-haired father, and Rowan often said he had an elfin look. There was heavy silence, and Edward felt that Mordeling was taking the question at face value. But that truth had nothing to do with what Mordeling would say next. It would give the expedient answer. Still, no. It came reluctantly. He might be lying, of course, but Edward felt a deep wave of relief. "Does my mother have other sons?" Suddenly Edward knew she did not, and the question would have hurt the dark elf, and was glad. Your mother might be dead for all you know, or care, it seems." The dark elf's narrow nostrils twitched as if Edward stank, and the lines around his mouth deepened. And this thing just fell out on me. Great. Yeah. Piece just fell out here, people. 1 second. Damn thing just fell apart, and I have to fix it while on camera. Wait. Come on. Yeah. Okay, I fixed it. Back to the story. This horrible, horrible story. She was not dead. Edward would have known. The bitter injustice of Merlin's contempt stung. "Did she send you to me? Do you take me for an errand boy?" he snapped, and spoke to his companion. "Let us take him now and be gone. We may discuss it at leisure." The golden elf held his hand. "Patience, my cousin," and to Edward. "Well, youngling, will you come?" Dark tales were told of human children kidnapped by elves, who hungered for young humans. "I don't know your name," Edward temporized. Do you love your life here so much? Edward looked at the palace in the distance, the banners floating lazily above, the town below, the sparkling bay, the distant mountains. I love Daggerfall. Ah, and you shall return to hold it, Prince Edward. I, Ericon Grun Archmagister, swear it to you. Merlin swung about, protesting sharply in Elvish. The dragon spat a bit of flame, but the unicorn did not move. Its golden eyes regarded Edward steadily. Unicorns do not abide any sort of falsity. The words floated through his mind in his mother's voice. Eric Carrad Ergun the Archmagister, I will come with you. You must ride with Moralen. The Lord Akatosh has consented to this necessity. The elf made a sweeping gesture toward the dragon. It wasn't fit to touch a unicorn, of course. Very well then. I don't suppose I could bring my dog. Where was he? Shag was always with him, asleep in the grass. Shag the ever alert? Edward knelt to touch him. A heated discussion in Elvish ensued, during which the dragon scorched the grass. Moralen swung down and picked Shag up with distaste. Very well then. But I warn you that Akatosh is at the limit of his patience. Melt then. Lord Akatosh, I am most deeply obliged by your indulgence. If I ever may repay it... You will, Moralen interrupted. He seized Edward by the belt and tossed him onto the dragon. Edward settled himself between the dragon's neck and the wings, and the sleeping Shag was draped limply in front of him. There isn't much room for, Edward began, and jerked in astonishment as the dragon shifted beneath him and grew larger. Much larger. Moralen vaulted up behind with a prodigious leap for one in armor. The unicorn jumped the 9-foot wall, clearing it neatly. The dragon's great wings stretched. It crouched, then leapt into the air. His riders swayed wildly. The dark elf muttered something Edward couldn't understand in Elvish, and they steadied. The wings beat strongly, and the dragon circled low over the keep, gaining altitude slowly. People were running about now, shunning and pointing. Yeah, people, this is basically a boring novel. Honestly, I'd rather read the horrible play to this. So far, this has just been torture. Edward saw his old nurse, and waved and shouted, Goodbye, goodbye, I'll be back sometime. Arrows flew through the air as bowmen shot, while the nurse screamed and clutched at the arms of those nearest. King Cossier ran naked onto the battlements, screaming and waving his fists. Child of a demon, come back and I'll thrash you within an inch of your worthless life. Moralen, come down and fight, like the man you aren't. Moralen's loud laughter rang clear of the temple bells, cascading over the keep. He shouted, Be glad I don't, little kin of the small... Okay then! The dragon circled almost lazily, and let out a huge gout of flame. Arrows clinked harmlessly in his golden scales. I'm off to see my mother! Edward screamed down, noting the upturned faces of his stepmother and their red-haired sons. Lorraine had a fur-trimmed robe, clutched round her. Her long hair floated wildly. 4 pairs of eyes fastened on him. Not Moralen, glittering with fury and hatred. Edward stopped waving and clutched Shag tightly with both hands. Moralen's mail-clad arm was securely about his waist. Edward slumped against him, feeling quite safe for the first time in a very long while. The bowmen had stopped shooting. Most of them were looking at the royal family. The king danced with rage. The great dragon's wings beat harder now as they headed due south over the water. Aren't we going to Ebonheart? The boy twisted round and looked up at Moralen. Your mother awaits you at the first hold in Somerset, little prince. Why did you wait so long to fetch me? Querulous child, do you think dragons and unicorns to the bin of elves or men? Your mother came to me full willing, but she could not bring you. You were too closely guarded by your father's men. Would you have had us lay waste to your land to take you by force? She thought you would be safe and cared for, and she was desperate. No, this was the dragon's plan. Of all the astonishing events of the afternoon, this was the most surprising. The notion that a dragon should take an interest in him, when not even his own family did. But willing, the elf said. Far willing. You are the focus of large events, youngling. Your task is to prepare yourself for a king. Anonymous. A king such as your people have never have known. Our task is to aid you. Sleep now. Waves of sleep assaulted Edward's mind, one after another. But he meant to ask Morelli about his mother, but the last wave was too big. It crashed right over him, asleep at the dark fire-shot dreams. Okay, we need part 2 now. There we are. The reunion of first holds. Edward woke to a red sky. The sun was just peeking over the western mountains. They were nearing a glittering tower, fire flashing from every facet. The dragon veered to fly nearer, and light flashed several times from the tower's top as they dropped suddenly. Edward's stomach felt very peculiar. He sighed and stirred, and felt Maitland shift so that the right arm now held Edward. He stretched and yawned. Not much longer now. It's several days by horse from the Crystal Tower to First Hold. By Judge the Akatosh will have us there within the hour. We're not stopping at the tower? Eric, do not use that name so lightly. Not even to me. The Archmagister will not return for days yet. Unicorns are brother to not as fast as dragons fly. You see the elven homeland at dawn Gotta love the broken text. Gotta love this broken text, people. Edward's gaze roamed the deep green fields and rugged hills. There was no sign of habitation. It's lovely, he said politely, but not so beautiful as High Rock, he added of loyalty and farms. The firstborn live nestled deep in the trees, and they do not tear up the earth and plant anew, but make gladly what ere was. No sign of habitation. What? And we have 2 pages of this, and both pages were broken. Really? Really, we had 2 pages of this, where it said the same text, and both times we couldn't see what it said. But take gladly what Oriel offers, and make return. Ah, the green smell of growing. Indeed, the air was as heady as the wine Edward used to sip from his father's cup before. I'm hungry. I expect so. A bit of shifting in Morling's left hand produced a small leaf-wrapped package. The dusky hand was large and strong, and looked neither human nor animal. Edward stared and took the package gingerly so not as to touch the hand. He felt Morlane stiffen, and the hand that held Edward relaxed its grow a bit. Groping? I have no idea. Edward felt ashamed of his reaction. It was neither kind nor wise to give offense in the circumstances. Morelli could quite easily drop him overboard. I need to bathe, but so do you, he said stiffly. Morelli was deliberately misinterpreting the reaction. Edward knew. Yes, I'm very dirty. Edward bit into the cake, which proved much better than it looked. My lady's mother's used to seeing me like this. At least she used to be. But perhaps I should bathe first. I think that you will not be offered that choice. At last. The dragon spread his wings, spit a huge gout of flame soaring skyward and dropped to earth in a large clearing. The landing was abrupt and jarring. Elves appeared quite suddenly, and arms reached up to take him and Shag, who woke at last, ran frantically in circles, and then sat panting at Edward's feet. A tall elf with fiery air like copper greeted them formally. "Greeting, my lord king. Your lady wife awaits you, Prince Edward. I welcome you to the land of the first-born Bee people. May you stay here through pleasant and productive." Morelin nodded deferentially. "Thank you, my host. My queen has waited long enough. We will go to her now." Morelin's hand on his shoulder steered Edward towards the largest tree he'd ever seen. The trunk was hollow. Steps inside led up. Opens gave onto more branches and bridges along and among the mighty branches. They proceeded along those until they reached the large canopy platform, furnished with seats and chests as if it were a room. A golden-skinned woman smiled at them and waved them in, then left. A tall, slender, pale-skinned, dark-haired human woman paced toward them, her eyes on Edward. Only Edward. "Why did you leave us?" The cry came from deep inside, ringing through him. It stopped her several paces from him. Now her eyes lifted to Morelin, who said in a harsher tone than Edward had heard from him, "Thou wilt address thy mother." Alira crossed quickly to Morelin and placed her hands on his clothes? I don't know. "All praise to Norgal for bringing you and my son safely to me. Thank you also the Lord of Dragons and the Bandit, who could not have lifted the boy more neatly himself. The Archmagister had somewhat to do with it as well." The Morelin's dusky hands came up to hold her bare arms lightly and tenderly. He laughed, looking relaxed and happy. But the hands against his chest formed a barrier against as much as a caress. "I am blessed indeed, but it is long since my son and I have spoken. We may find words more easily if we seek them alone together." Morelin's smile vanished instantly. "Are words then a thing which two can find more easily than three? Well, perhaps, at times, wife." He turned on his heel and left. The bridge, no sound at all. Alira watched after him, but he did not look back. Edward felt a regret that came with giving pain to his enemy. "Edward, my son, come and sit by me." Edward stood where he was. "Madam Mother, I have waited many years and traveled many leagues to have an answer. I will wait no longer, nor go one step further." "What have you been told?" "That you were most treacherously kidnapped by night with the aid of magic, while my father slept, trusting in the honor of his guests." "Your father told you that? And Morelin?" "Said that you came full willing. I would hear what you say." "Would you hear why I left your father, or why I did not take you with me, having chosen to go?" Edward paused, thinking. "Madam, I would hear the truth, therefore give the truth. I would hear why you left me behind. The other I think I know, as much as I can or would know, unless you other." "The truth? Truth is not a simple thing, existing apart from those who apprehend it. But I'll tell you my truth, and perhaps then you'll arrive at your truth." Alira walked back to her softly pillowed chair and composed herself. Nearby a small ruby-colored bird settled on a branch and trilled an accompaniment to her soft voice. "My parents arranged my marriage as is custom in our homeland. I did not love Kosir, but in the beginning I respected him and tried to be a good wife. He did not care for me, nor did he take care. And so he lost my respect and I died a little each day, without like an unintended plant. I was happy only with you, but Kosir thought I was making you too soft. Birthday I was allowed to spend only an hour each day with you. I listened to your cries and sat weeping, without heart for anything. Finally you ceased crying and asking for me, formed the habit of walking and riding all of the time. Alone say wanted to mine for ebony in the Rothgarian Mountains. The land wanted to use was part of my dowry. He was willing to train our people in the arts of its use, and even to give weapons of dark elf making. In return, our people were to aid him in keeping the goblins away, and allow him to form a colony of his people in High Rock. Kosir had no use for the land, and he wanted the weapons very much indeed. There were none better, so I favored the proposal. There were many details to be discussed and arranged, and it fell to me to conduct these negotiations. Kosir despises high elves, and he was jealous of Morelin, who was already famed as the finest fighter or whatever. But Morelin is more than a skilled fighter. He's well read, and played as if such taught by Joffrey and Jimsai both. He was a companion such as I'd only dreamed of. That and no more, I swear. We both loved to be outside, so our discussions took accompanied by his men and Kosir's. I tell you, this is a totally fragmented story. Why am I even bothering reading this? This is like all over the place of what it's saying. I can't understand the word of what's going on. Every time I try to get into the story, it like jars to somewhere else. This is terrible. When all was arranged, Kosir gave a great feast to celebrate the treaty. All of High Rock nobility came, and many from other provinces. At the end, Kosir was deep in his cups and let fall an insult that could only be washed out in blood. I'd long since retired with the other ladies, so I know not what it was, but I heard enough in private to know that Kosir had a challenge, and gave Kosir until noon. They might recover such wits that he had. Then Morelin came to me, alone in my chamber, and told me what had befallen. My lady, I think you will choose your brother as his champion. In any case, there will be a river of blood that may not be crossed in this life or any other. I could live without your love, but I would not have your enmity. Come with me now, as wife or honored guest, as you choose, and you shall serve as blood price instead of your kin or kith. And there in the moonlight, in my terror with my lady sleeping about me, I knew I loved him. Doubted I could live without him. And yet, I loved you more, my son. I whispered, I can't. My lady, you must choose. I am sorry. You see, don't you, Edward? If I stayed, it meant my brother's death. His innocent young blood. Or your father's. Or possibly that of the man I loved. Though I counted that most unlikely. Malin's fighting skills alone were super fair of this they would be entitled to call on magic aid, as where Morelin shook her head sadly. That will not do. It will go against my honor to part father and son. Leaving love alone, I am trained to duty, O'Leary said proudly. Should I have robbed you of your father and your loving uncle? I thought it likely that Kosir, she survived, would somehow blame me for the affair and use it as an excuse to put me away. I thought that Kosir would be pleased to have me gone. I knew he wanted the weapons very much. I could trade them for time with you, I thought. All this passed through my mind while Morelin stood waiting, not looking at me. Lady Mara, help me to choose wisely, I prayed. You want me as a wife. I could bring you nothing but trouble. Alira, or would you have you as wife? I want nothing but yourself. He shed his cloak and wrapped it round my body, pulling the bedclothes away. Morin, wait, is this right? What should I do? My lady, if I thought this wrong, I should not be standing here. Of the choices you are given, this one seems to me the most right. He swung me up in his arms and carried me to his horse. And so I left your father's house, clad only in his cloak, and riding before him. And wild joy mixed with my sorrow, so that I skull fell. That is my truth. Edward said quickly, it has parted my father and me in the end, with great reluctance, and only because the dragon says that you and your father were in truth already parted in heart. It's only a matter of more leagues, which provide a measure of safety for you. Merlin insisted that you should freely consent to come. You're free to return at any time you wish. Bowling would have just taken me. It was the Archmagister must consent. He's a patient man by nature, and is ancient to do Cassia no harm. Doubtless he felt the discussion could be carried on elsewhere, as well elsewhere. He called him King of the Small and laughed. Why? Are Daggerfall cockerels smaller than Ebonheart birds? Or what does it matter anyway? My father was very angry. I think he would have liked the fight, but it's true he hates me. I knew that, but I didn't want to know, so I pretended not to. I don't suppose Morwayland would do that. No. He'd lie though. He thought about telling me he was my father. Aurelia threw back her head and laughed. Her pretty rippling laugh. He remembered it from long ago, and it sent shivers down his back. He must have wanted to claim it very badly indeed if he let you see it. He's usually quicker than that. And he does not lie under oath, or to hurt those he loves. He doesn't love me. He doesn't even like me. But I do, dear son. You. Edward thought she was going to say he'd grown. Adults always remarked on his growth, even if he'd just seen them a week ago. Very strange, since he was very small for his age. Indeed, she said, you're just as I thought you'd be, with deep maternal satisfaction. And he loved you. But he said he was no one's errand boy, yet you dismissed him as if he were. Alira's face and neck burned a deep crimson. Nay, though I am reduced to servant man, it seems. Morwayland had entered silently, bearing a huge tray piled high with food. Get me a stool, boy. You can play page if I play server. You must be famished, and I thought I best had entered silently. No, never mind. Return before my wife gets round to the rest of my fowls. Could take him most of the day with them. He shut the mail in fresh black jerkin and the hose with civilly sash tied round his narrow waist, but the black sword still swung by his side. Mara, help us. You have enough food for a small army. I've broken my fast. Alira's small hand crossed for the elf's arm, slid down it caressingly, then crossed his hand and squeezed it, lifted it to her still hot cheek, brushed it with her lips. Edward looked away quickly, discomforted by the sight of his dusky skin against her fairness. This is for me, and a bit for the boy. But pray join us, my dear. You've grown thin, pining for me, no doubt. He wrapped a lock of her dark curly hair around a finger and tugged at it, grinning, then fell on the food like a starving wolf, attacking it with small silvery weapons, instead of eating it with his fingers as human did. The food was wonderful. Edward ate until he could eat no more. Eavesdropping, he murmured thoughtfully. He'd been mulling over a list of Morwayland's thoughts while he ate, and realized he'd spoken along. By Xanathar, boy, if you humans will shout your private conversations, you expect me to shut my ears for wool? He tapped one of his large pointed ears. Edward hurriedly tried to remember what they'd said. What he'd said. Lying. Oh dear, maybe he hadn't heard. So I'm a liar, am I, boy? Virgil help him. Edward felt he was drowning. Could the elf read minds? He hoped that wasn't the insult his father had used. I meant I thought that you were thinking about it. You did hesitate. Edward gulped. He was making matters worse. Possibly I was trying to remember. The sardonic tone was back. You don't even like me, Edward burst out. That doesn't seem to have stopped your true father from claiming. Morwayland, don't, Alira interrupted, but the elf held up his hand to quiet her. I'm not so sure, Edward flashed. Why do you say that? I don't know. Rowan says things, and I'm not all like him. Everyone remarks on it, and then stops talking. What things? Speak, boy. About how fond Mother was of her brother when they were young. How sad and angry he was when she was carried off. More like a lover, she said, than a brother. She says it very sweetly, but like she means something of it. Something too dirty to say. Other times she talks about how elfing I look, about how quickly after marriage I came. Not as quickly as her first son, though. Merlin leaped up. By the Avenger, I will go back and wring the vixen's neck. The human! He bit off the insult, but his red eyes flamed rage. His muscles swelled and his hair stood on end. You do not look half-elven. I've never met your mother until 4 years after your conception. Lorraine, it seems, cannot decide which lie she wishes to use. But incest! May Kel strike her down if I may not. The tall elf paced furiously around the room, lithe as a Khajiit, hand fondling his sword platform swayed and dipped. She's ambitious for her sons at Edward's expense. The question is, how many will believe her? Not enough if she was planning to have him killed instead. Alira's smooth brow wrinkled a bit. I never disliked her, you know, nor she me. She wanted my place, and I was glad enough to let her have it, save for Edward. You want me to be king, so that I'll let you have the Eben mines. Edward had just worked out the puzzle. Oh, devil take the Eben, which he probably will. I have a better chance of getting cooperation from Rian's boys once your father's dead. They'd have reason for gratitude, and the bargain's a good one. Although the chances they could keep a civil tongue long enough to sign a contract seem poor, given their... Then why? You don't even like me. Mara, help me. Liking a person is a human concept. One day they like you, the next day they don't. Until this and back to liking you again. My own wife does this to me, but claims to love me even when she doesn't like me. Except of course on the days when she doesn't do either, and talks about joining the Order of Rihanna. Fortunately that only happens once a year or so. I go hunting until she comes to her senses. You exaggerate, that only happened once. And well you know it. I remember enjoying the recovery period. Maybe it should happen more often. They grinned at each other. Seriously, people, I really don't know what's going on. Like, this is a really long book. This one chapter is too long. And at the same time, I don't have any idea what's going on because of all the breaches in the story. But why do you want me to be king? Edward persisted. I told you, it's Akatosh's notion, and the Archmagisters. I just chose the ride. Ask them. I shall ask the Archmagister when I see him. And that's my plan. You'll spend a few weeks at the tower before heading north with us. Only that? Does the prospect to spend the winter with your mother and me displease you so much? No, sir. I agree to go with Eric. Not you. The lungs hung unsaid between them. You will in time. A few weeks there now will fit you to begin your training in magic. I can teach you spells, but you need hardening. Your body must catch up to your mind. It's the Archmagister's will. Fighting magic? I want to learn other things. How to call beasts. How to heal. And float. You'll learn that, I'll doubt not. And I think a fighter can't heal. It's the first spell you'll learn. But a king must know how to fight. I'm not good at it. Dragon's Teeth Boy. Exactly what you must learn. If I cannot... You've courage and a clear head and the potential to learn magic. That's more than most people ever have. I can teach you the rest. Edward's head whirled on with the unaccustomed praise. I have, you can? Do you think any of your father's full court would stand naked before a dragon, a unicorn, the Archmagister, and the champion of Tamriel, and demand justice of them? Justice? Faced with such, they might have managed to beg for mercy, if they could speak at all, which is doubtful. I did that? I did, didn't I? Edward was astonished. He wanted to add that he hadn't thought about it. Aye, you did, and it's a deed that shall be sung from here to Morrowind. I'll compose the ballad myself, as soon as I have a nap. I don't sleep as sound as some on dragons' backs. You enchanted me in shag asleep, and the rest of the castle with the help of my friends. Oh, can you levitate? Will you show me? Not so fast. I kept a holding spell on us all night to keep us on the dragon's back. Until I'm rested, I couldn't light a candle with the aid of a match. Oh, well, I'd still rather like the Archmagister than be a fighter. Ha! If he knows the Archmagister that he cannot fight, I hope he'll find time to show you how to wield a staff. No better weapon for early training, and no better trainer. Now, of the four you saw before you, which would you say could best the others? Wait, what? I'm totally lost! This is like all over the place! Edward thought carefully for several minutes. Sir, my judgment is poor indeed, but if you would still have my answer, it would seem that the one who claims the title champion of Tamriel must be the best. Yet must not the Archmagister be the master in magic, and train the arms as well, it seems? So which should prevail? Could any mortal stand against the dragon's fire and claws of teeth? And I know not of the unicorn, save that it is fleet and has a very sharp horn, and hooves as well. So guess the unicorn. It has the mildest manner. And since you asked the question, it seems the unlikely answer may be correct. Well answered, youngling. The unicorn would win easily in any single close combat. No mortal or even dragon can move quickly enough to land a blow. It cannot be burned or touched by any magic or elemental power. Its hooves are deadly, and a single touch of its horn will kill any enemy, although the horn will burn away. The most powerful can regenerate within moments, however. And the floor of the champion of Tamriel would probably be the loser against any of the others. Although the title is no idle boast. Moralia is not accustomed to being so outclassed. My manners have suffered in consequence. My lord king, I am most deeply in your debt. You have done me great. I can repay you, I will. Forgive my brash words and ill manners. I have dwelt among the rude and boorish, it seems. My distaste was gone though. As if by magic, the thought drifted into his mind, and then he released his hands and clasped Moralia around his waist. The elf's hands stroked his dark hair and clasped his thin shoulders. I thank you, my wife. After only 5 years of marriage, you presented me with a fine son, 9 years of age. Remarkable. In fact, magical. And that's only 13 pages, supposedly. I feel like it was a lot longer at 13 pages, but even if it was, that's a lot of torture. that was a lengthy bit of torture right there. Yeah. In fact, that pretty much has been like another whole half an hour, maybe a little bit longer. I continue more, but the problem is that it's actually getting late, and we still have 10 parts to go. God, I hate this book series already. Really, this is just the worst. It feels like we've kind of led our way up to like the worst of them all, and we've got it. This King Edward story I really, really hate. But yeah, parts 3 through 12 will be up and coming next time, people. God, I really hate the idea of this. Let's close up. Say my farewells. I'm done. Hopefully it'll still be there when we get back. Probably not. And we'll probably have to hunt the world looking for part 11 once more. But hopefully not. And hopefully we're able to finish all this up so we can actually sell 11 books and have a much cleaner inventory finally. Anyway, not much progress in the book series. We went from 9 to 5, but really it was part of it was because we had to read a 4-part book series, 4-part one for the history of Daggerfall. Though that was relatively short. And now we have this ultimate terrible thing to read. But hopefully I believe that this will probably be one of the longest things remaining. And after this we should hopefully have like an easier time of everything. So getting this out of the way is definitely like the big thing to get rid of. So yeah. Until next time, people, this has been Torture. Thank you very much all for watching. I'm getting out of this hellhole. See you all next time.